Correcting run-on sentences. After viewing this video, you should be able to identify when commas are missing, unnecessary, or used incorrectly. You should be able to revise sentences that use commas incorrectly, correct sentences with comma splices and fused sentences, recognize when to use a comma compared to when to use a semicolon. Run-ons, commas, and fused sentences. A run-on sentence joins two independent clauses without the correct punctuation or conjunction. A comma splice joins two independent clauses with a comma. So you basically have two independent thoughts put together with only a comma in the middle. And a fused sentence occurs when two independent clauses are joined together with no comma and no conjunction. Both of these are types of run-on sentences, but you need to know which one's which so that you can correct them appropriately. Here's a comma splice. Chris sent out the email yesterday. It did not contain a meeting agenda. Let's look at the same sentence without the comma. Chris sent out the email yesterday. It did not contain the meeting agenda. So how would you go about fixing these sentences? You could simply put a period after each independent clause. So Chris sent out the email yesterday. It did not contain the meeting agenda. Or you can use a semicolon. Because the ideas are closely related, you wouldn't even necessarily need a conjunction here. Chris sent out the email yesterday. It did not contain the meeting agenda. You can use a coordinating conjunction. These are your fanboys. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Chris sent out the email yesterday, but it did not contain the meeting agenda. And lastly, you can turn this into a complex sentence by adding a subordinating conjunction. Chris sent out the email yesterday, even though it did not contain the meeting agenda. So, semicolons versus commas. Semicolons combine two independent clauses without a connecting word, as long as the ideas in the clauses are closely connected. Chris sent out the email yesterday. It did not contain the meeting agenda. See, there's no punctuation here. No conjunction here. The punctuation mark, semicolon, is enough. You could also add a conjunctive adverb. Chris sent out the email yesterday. However, it did not contain the meeting agenda. The word however here just goes along to show the relation between the two clauses. It's not necessary, but it can make things more clear at different times. The subordinating conjunctions and conjunctive adverbs are also discussed in the types of sentences video. Punctuation options. Let's look at these options of commas and semicolons. The printer broke last week and it won't be fixed until tomorrow. The printer broke last week. Unfortunately, it won't be fixed until tomorrow. The printer broke last week. It won't be fixed until tomorrow. Sometimes it's hard to see the difference in these punctuation marks, but hopefully by reading them, you can hear the difference. Which one sounds like it's written on a higher level? Usually it's the one with the conjunctive adverb. So here, unfortunately. Unfortunately links the two ideas together, and it tells you that you're getting one piece of information and then something else or a result from it is coming. The computer was purchased for half price, yet it performs well. The computer was purchased for half price. Nevertheless, it performs well. The computer was purchased for half price. It still performs well. Again, more example. When should you use other commas? You always use commas between two or more items in a series. This is called the Oxford comma. I have finished renovating the living room, master bedroom, and guest bathroom. Exception. Use a semicolon to separate serial items that contain internal commas. So let's look at this sentence here. We met the chairs of chemical environmental engineering, mechanical, materials and aerospace engineering, and social sciences. So this sentence is listing the chairs of various departments. This second department here has commas in it and a conjunction. If you didn't have the semicolons here, you might think that mechanical materials and aerospace engineering and social sciences is all one entity, but it is not. So let's look at the Oxford comma. I sent Sydney to the store to buy green beans, peas, and carrots. You notice in my example I have absolutely no commas at all. So did I ask her to buy green beans, peas, and carrots? Or did I ask her to buy green beans, peas, and carrots? Without the punctuation, you really don't know. So you're going to have to make sure that you use that Oxford comma. The only reason the Oxford comma went away was actually in journalism, when people that were typesetting newspapers and magazines had to save space. So at the end of a line, instead of using a whole space for a comma, they took it out and it just ran together. However, we're not worried about that anymore now. So what we need to make sure when we write is that we are writing clearly. And the Oxford comma does that for us. Other uses of commas. You always use it after an introductory phrase or a dependent clause that precedes an independent clause. So let's look at an example of it in a complex sentence. As soon as the NCA completed its visit, we had a meeting about ABET. As soon as is a subordinating conjunction. So it makes this a dependent clause, so you put your comma here. And let's look at this one. At the start of the semester, the copier is always in high demand. At the start of the semester is a several word introduction. It's a prepositional phrase. It's not a subordinating conjunction. It's a preposition. So this phrase here, to make it clearer, you just put a comma and then you begin the rest of your independent clause. A comma is optional after a 1 or 2 word introductory phrase, but the comma should be included if needed to avoid confusion. So for example, after studying, the students usually watch TV or play video games. You don't have to put this comma here, but what we tend to do when we are reading something that begins with a preposition, we usually read quickly, and we'll read like the first 2 or 3 or 4 words thinking it all goes together. So we're kind of conditioned to already put that comma somewhere in the sentence. So follow that format. We would hear, after studying the students. Well, after studying the students is not the prepositional phrase for this sentence. It's only after studying, because the students usually watch TV or play video games is an independent clause. So when in doubt, put a comma for clarity, but it is generally optional. A comma is not needed in a complex sentence if the independent clause comes first. We will retain more students if we require faculty to report midterm grades. Okay. We will retain more students as the independent clause if begins your dependent clause. There's no reason to put a comma here. However, if the dependent clause comes first, usually you do. Although students hate to study grammar, most of them make many grammatical errors in papers. Okay, so we have although, which is a subordinating conjunction, so it makes this first clause dependent. Because of the length of this clause, a comma is necessary. Some people will leave it out, and it is a bit of a style preference, but generally you'd want to keep it in.